The World Food Programme suspends operations in Sudan after 3 of its staff members die in escalating violence between rival military forces. Thousands of Czechs gathered in Prague on Sunday, calling on the government to resign as they protested against high inflation and energy prices. Heavy fighting continued in the Sudanese capital Khartoum on Sunday, with flashpoints elsewhere in what is one of the country's worst escalations of violence. At least 56 civilians have died and 400 others have been injured as rival factions battle for control of the country. The UN's World Food Programme says it's temporarily suspended its humanitarian work after 3 of its staff members were killed. WFP Chief Cindy McCain tweeted that aid workers should never be a target and that all parties must agree on their safety. Sudanese armed forces and its former allies, the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces group, are fighting after tensions broke out over a proposed transition to civilian rule. This after the military vowed to dismantle the group. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres and other top diplomats have strongly condemned the fighting that threatens to destabilize much of the region. Ukrainian prisoners of war climbing onto trucks after their release as part of an exchange with Russia. Kyiv says 130 soldiers, sailors, border guards and others captured by Moscow were on their way home. It's not clear how many Russian soldiers were returned. The announcement came as Orthodox Christians in both countries marked Easter. In the Ukrainian town of Stare Saltov, residents held a service in the basement of the church, which was severely damaged in fighting. Meanwhile, Russia's top bishop, Patriarch Kirill, led an Easter service at the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour in Moscow. The Patriarch, who's previously justified the country's offensive in Ukraine, called for peace to be restored. He spoke of what he described as the sad events, which may even be described as an internal feud, and said everything must be done to stop the conflict. The service was attended by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Thousands of people gathering on Wenceslas Square in Prague on Sunday to protest against high inflation and energy prices. They called on the government to resign over its handling of the current crisis. Both inflation and the cost of energy have soared in the Czech Republic, cutting into household budgets.
Dneska jsme tady, protože chceme vyjádřit svůj nesouhlas s touhletou dnešní vládou, s politickou situací, co se tady vůbec děje v České republice a v podstatě i v celé Evropě.
Vidím naši budoucnost vlastně špatně. To znamená, zdá se mi, že krachují podniky, prostě lidi mají čím dál méně peněz a svým způsobem jakoby mám pochybnosti vlastně, co přinese budoucnost.
It was the second such rally in the capital, called for by a new non-parliamentary political party known as PRO. Another 55 migrants rescued in the Mediterranean Sea. They were picked up by the Italian charity emergency vessel Life Support on Saturday afternoon. It says those rescued include 3 women and 6 children. Their 10-metre boat was sighted in international waters near Libya after hours of drifting without an engine. They come from several African countries and Palestine. The UN says the first 3 months of this year have been the deadliest in 6 years of migrants crossing the Mediterranean in often unsafe smugglers' boats.
The G7 has pledged to accelerate the phase-out of fossil fuels, but failed to agree an exact date to end polluting power sources such as coal. After 2 days of talks in Sapporo, Japan, the bloc's environment and energy ministers issued a 36-page document laying out their commitments ahead of a G7 summit in May.
このほか、プラスチックにつきましては、2040年までに環境への流出を食い止める行動に尽力することで合意いたしました。また、すべての締約国に対して、遅くとも2050年までのネットゼロ、2025年までの世界全体の排出量のピークアウトへのコミットを呼びかけました。
The group of 7 industrialized nations account for 40% of the world's economic activity and a quarter of global carbon emissions.
passion for more renewable energy will now be the focus of these anti-nuclear campaigners in Germany. They celebrated in Munich, 70 kilometers south of one of 3 nuclear power plants that were shut down in the country on Saturday. The plants were supposed to stop running at the end of last year, but that was postponed after the war in Ukraine led to an energy crisis. Munich's mayor supported the delay, but he also backs the weekend shutdown.
Die Zukunft heißt auf jeden Fall nicht Atomkraft, sondern die Zukunft heißt erneuerbare Energien, renewable energies. Das wird unsere Zukunft sein. Wir in München setzen seit 2008 eigentlich ausschließlich auf den Ausbau erneuerbarer Energien.
A survey done by YouGov in Germany found 65% of respondents wanted the plants to continue running, but the majority wanted them to shut down eventually. Opponents of the shutdowns say nuclear power plants provide an energy source with lower emissions. Germany has increased its use of coal as it shifted away from Russian gas last year.
Both critics and supporters of the shutdowns say that renewable energy needs to play more of a role in Germany's future. But while there's plenty of wind energy in the north, there's a lack of infrastructure to bring it here to the south. And this is where many of Germany's industries are, and they demand a lot of energy.
More than 40% of the country's energy is from renewable sources. Greenpeace says the advancement of clean energy technology happened more quickly than governments in the country expected.
If there would have been more political will to develop and to really foster renewable energies, we could have been now much faster and much further than we are today.
The Social Democrats who lead the coalition government say they are committed to cleaner energy. But the Free Democratic Party, which is also in the coalition, came out against the plant shutdowns. Environmental activists are concerned progress will be derailed by government infighting and want politicians to focus on fighting climate change.
I think it's a problem for not only the young generation, but for all people, also the old people, but of course especially the young generation is faced with this problem and is going to be faced much more with it.
Christina Jovanovski, Euronews, Munich.
The Shiveluch volcano on Russia's far eastern Kamchatka Peninsula has spewed an ash plume of up to 15 kilometers into the sky. So what are the risks of volcanic eruptions for aircraft? Well, an eruption releases a large cloud of ash, which aircraft is warned not to fly through or near. We found out why.
When you fly through an ash plume, you ingest that ash and it melts. It gets so hot that it actually becomes a liquid. And then it can accumulate in the cooler part of the jet engine. And that accumulation can cause it to block up the engine and block it. And if the engine fails, then the plane starts to fall out of the sky.
Dozens of incidences related to ash clouds have already been recorded. Damage and serious breakdowns, but no fatal accidents so far. The airline industry relies on satellite data to avoid ash clouds.
There's been a real revolution in our ability to do Earth observation from space in the last 2 decades. In particular, the European Space Agency has done a really good job of producing these a new group, a new team of satellites called Sentinel, and these have opened up a lot more opportunities for how we can do volcano monitoring from space.
The eruption of Eyjafjallajökull in Iceland in 2010 will go down in the annals of civil aviation. The air clouds paralysed European air traffic. Tens of thousands of flights were cancelled.
There are many bridges between Istanbul and Brussels, especially in the field of culture. Under the aegis of Hub Brussels, the Belgian consulate in Istanbul hosted the famous Roma clarinetist Ramazan Sezler, who will perform in Belgium for the Balkan Traffic Festival at the end of April.
Yapmış olduğum müzik esasında yani yıllar evvel, bundan 50 sene önce falan müziğimizde işte bas gitar kullanılmıyordu. Ne bileyim ben işte kendi müziğimizi cazla buluşturuyoruz. Onlarla birlikte müzikler yapıyoruz. Böylece daha keyifli olmuş oluyor. Yani farklılık katıyoruz böylece. Müziğimize farklılık katmış oluyoruz.
Istanbul is full of music clubs, including the famous Babylon Hall, where you can discover the latest trends. The Istanbul-based electro band Electro Hafiz is a successful fusion of several musical styles, a blend of Turkish psychedelia, funk and grooves. Frédéric Ponsard met the founding members of Electro Hafiz for Euronews Culture.
Don't try to mix the East and the West. Just we listen to so much Eastern music, we listen to so much Western music, so that's what we make. It's so natural for us. It just comes from our hearts. We are not planning it or so structuring it, right?
No,
it's what it is.
Electro Hafiz represent this very contemporary side of Istanbul music, with the contribution of rap sounds by guest DJs and rappers like Group Ses, a big name in Turkish rap. They will be playing in Brussels for the Balkan Traffic Festival on the 29th of April.